This conference has involved us in a marvelous feast of Tagore's influential thoughts and works. Gurudev had a remarkable capacity to profoundly affect others' ways of thinking about being in the world. This presentation will be spoken over the silent films of Bengal's folk traditions, made in 1931 and 1933 by the Dutch ethnomusicologist Arnold Bakke, who studied at Shantiniketan from 1926 to 1929, returning in 1931 and 33. By playing the entire edited film corpus of 20 minutes, I felt that was the best way to do justice to the film fragments as I put them together, and I hope you don't find my spoken soundtrack too distracting from the visuals. But please feel free to participate in this ongoing research project by using the 3x5 cards to write any observations or identifications you think might be helpful. We can start the film now. The first still shows Arnold Bakke using wax cylinders to record Buddhist priests at the Temple of the Tooth during his research expedition to Ceylon in 1932. During his research expedition, which was following in Bakke's footsteps, as he often did, in Tagore's footsteps, sorry, we don't have digitizations of his cylinder recordings made in Bengal. We're working on that. And sometimes they do correspond to the film clips, but not always. But we've dealt with similar situations in our film monograph, the Bakke Restudy, 1938 to 1984, concerning his related research on performance in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. I hope you have a chance to watch and listen to that video one day. This is the first time we've explored his Bengali materials. As we watch these silent films, you see a section of performances by Adivasis, indigenous peoples or tribals, some brought by the folklorist Guru Sadev Dutt to Shantiniketan for Tagore and the students to see. He was influenced by Cecil Sharp and the folk song revival movement when they met in England in 1931, but he'd already begun his revivalism in Bengal. Dutt started the Bhattacharya movement in Bengal in 1932. In his words, and much in sync with Tagore's philosophy, this movement is to bring back to humanity in all countries the ideal and practice of the wholeness of life. And he is credited with discovering the Dom's Raibeshi dance, which you'll see in a few minutes. In the vast literature by and about Rabindranath Tagore, there are only fleeting references to Arnold Bakke, the Dutch Sanskritist, linguist, singer, and scholar of India's music. But Bakke's life and career were totally captivated and transformed by Tagore's prodigious powers and vast worldview from the time they first met in Europe, sometime in the mid-20s. Bakke soon followed Tagore to Shantiniketan, where he spent his first 4 years imbibing Tagore's worldview, acquiring a sense of dedication to the non-elite arts and cultures of South Asia. Tagore's view of India was that it consisted of countless unique and interacting communities and should never be made into a monolithic nation. Bakke explored and illustrated this vision throughout the subcontinent during 15 years of study by documenting the multifarious traditions he encountered, using audio recorders, still cameras, and 16mm film. However, before his first departure for India in 1925, Arnold made sure that his fiancée, the pianist Cornelia Timmers, was trained like himself in Bengali at the School of Oriental and African Studies of the University of London, where she was enrolled in the Bengali course during the spring and summer of 1925. A few months later, she and Arnold were married, setting sail for Calcutta in December. Arriving at Shantiniketan in January 1926, Bakke studied Sanskrit under Pandit Bhimrao Shastri to complete his PhD dissertation for Leiden University on Sangeet Darpan, a medieval Sanskrit treatise on classical music and dance. During that time, he became especially close to Pandit Rabindranath Tagore, the poet's grandnephew, whom you will see in these films during the holy celebrations. From Rabindranath's performances and transcriptions, Bakke transcribed and translated many of Tagore's compositions in staff notation, publishing them in a bilingual French and English edition in 1935 because he was very worried that the original melodies would otherwise be lost. Simultaneously with his classically trained Western voice, he learned to sing Indian classical music and imbibed Tagore's ethos of admiration for Bengal's variegated rural performances, such as those of the indigenous Santhals and the Baul, wandering mystics, leading to his career of studying and documenting India's diverse folk, tribal, and liturgical musics. Tagore must have appreciated the Bake's company as he invited them to accompany him on his journey to Java and Bali in the summer of 1927, partly so that the Bakas could mediate and translate from Dutch to Bengali and vice versa. Although Baka warned Tagore of the political problems in the Dutch-occupied Indonesia at the time, Tagore vowed he would stay out of politics. Baka was a kind-hearted and witty conversationalist, brilliant, and he often broke into jovial songs spontaneously during conversations. When Tagore invited them again to join him in 1928 on a trip to Rajputana, Baka continued his research on his Sanskrit manuscript, as well as on Vedic chant, which became another of his areas of expertise. But soon, his research changed. Over the 4 years he spent at Shantiniketan, Bake learned from Tagore a deep appreciation and respect for the musics of the lower echelons of Indian society. And Tagore's impact on Bake's life's work with India's folk music was foundational. While Tagore often expressed opposition to the idea of nationalism in India, he was deeply patriotic. But he conceived of India as a patchwork collection of distinct but interwoven communities, each with its own unique characteristics. In his words, India is many countries packed in one geographical receptacle. Baka provided musical illustrations of Tagore's model by exploring and developing a research methodology for documentation and study involving extensive travel throughout a vast number of subcontinental communities, from Bengal to Sri Lanka to Nepal to Karachi.